And now, from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word in another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, April 16th, 2021. We got a busy program as we march to Pentecost. So let's get right into our program this morning. The Constitution, is it changing? And it is changing, whether people realize it or not. We're going to bring some information we brought to you last year. Christianity is under assault. This is a continuing story that we're going to be a theme probably from now to the return of Jesus Christ, and showing you how the changes are taking place. This time we're going to bring in something going on in Canada and showing how it's working its way down to the U.S. This is a big one. This is China flexing its muscles. We're just going to begin doing the talk with it today, showing you how now they're challenging the United States. Even as of this morning, they put out a release that they are just as big and equal to the United States, and they're flexing their muscles. Then we're going to pick up where we left off last week with explaining the Feast of Weeks using the chart. We gave you a little test question last week. Let's see how you did today when we get to that section. Favorable ruling for the churches. Whenever we can, we're going to bring you some positive news. This is about the most we got right now. The Supreme Court Friday shut down a California regulation that was limiting religious worship at home, the latest in a series of rulings which the justices have found the coronavirus pandemic regulations violate the First Amendment's protection of religion. That's good news. The 5-4 unsigned opinion published just before midnight last Friday, but you can see how close it was, even that, 5-4. The court also noted that this is the fifth time it has overturned a California-based U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit Court in similar cases. It's amazing how liberal the judges are in the Ninth Circuit. If you remember the last administration, every time there was something that was passed by the president, it was always brought right in the court and overturned or put on halt. Well, it continues as we speak today. Right, let's get these little, you can't make this up today. We got two of them, all right, two stories. First of all is a best-selling devotional book. You ain't going to make this up. I'm looking at our team to see if they've seen it. That's right. Praying to God for help to hate. You can't make it up. You just can't make this up. Clinical psychologist, are you ready for this? This is right out of a best-selling book, Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes, who describes herself as a clinical psychologist, a public theologian, an ecumenical minister whose work focuses upon healing. Now, you got to bear with me here, because remember, she's asking God to help her hate. But the work is healing. So what is she doing? She's asking for the healing, the legacies of racial and gender oppression. Sounds really good. But bear with me. Let's go a little bit further. The best-selling devotional includes prayer by social justice activists asking God to help her hate white people. She just doesn't have enough hate there going on right now. Dear God, this is in the prayer, please help me hate white people, or at least want to hate them, and at least I want to stop caring about them individually, collectively, and I want to stop caring about their misguided, racist souls, to stop believing that they can stop being racist. Now, do you think God's going to answer a prayer like that? Unbelievable. Now, I want you to keep this in mind, because I'm going to bring this into a little bit later into a story to showing you a contrast. All right, let's go through this. All right. So now, let's get to the second story. By not allowing puberty blockers, remember we brought the story up that they're trying to pass where you can have puberty blockers. You can't give them puberty blockers when they're real little. You got to be able to stop them from giving the opportunity and let them change to whatever they want to be. Boy, girl, cat, dog, mouse, whatever they want. It's tantamount to murder. So if you let your child grow up in a normal way, the way God intended, This is not made up. It's tantamount to murdering a child. That's what they're telling people now. This is that actress Sophia Bush was not allowing kids sex changes tantamount to murder. Actress Sophia Bush, best known for her role in One Tree Hill, which I've never heard of before. I don't know what it is, who watches it. Likened the prohibition to puberty blockers and sex change procedures for minors to murder. That's right. This is tantamount, she said, to murder. Kids will tell us who they are. It's our job to support them, not demonize or harm them. That's right. And a child shall rule them. Does that ring a bell in Scripture? Can you believe how all these things that God had said thousands of years ago are now just coming to play? And the society we live in is insane enough to buy this nonsense? Got a video here. Oops, let me back this up. We got a video here. I'm bringing it in. It isn't this story, but it's talking about the sexual changes. And in case you didn't know it, there's a thing called pansexual. There's a new one, if you hadn't heard of it. Let's play that video.
Jo Siwa, a 17-year-old dancer, singer, and actress, says she's pansexual after coming out as a member of the LGBTQ+ community in January. What are the details? In a new cover story with People, JoJo said that she was reluctant to label herself when she first decided to come out, but later revealed that she's very happy in her relationship with her 18-year-old girlfriend, Kylie Prue. "I still don't know what I am," she admitted. "It's like, I want to figure it out. And I have this joke. Her name is Kylie. And so I say that I'm keysexual. But like, I don't know, bisexual, pansexual, queer, lesbian, gay, straight." The 17-year-old added, "I always just say, gay, because it just kind of covers it, or queer, because I think the keyword is cool. I like queer," she added. "Technically, I would say that I'm pansexual, because that's how I have always been my whole life, is just like, my human is my human. And if that person happened to be a boy, great, and if that person happened to be a girl, great. What else?" Pop star Demi Lovato, 28, also recently came out as pansexual, and in a recent interview, said that she's attracted to anything, really. Of her newly accepted sexuality, Lovato said, "I'm so fluid now, and a part of the reason why I am so fluid is because I was, like, super closeted off." She also said that it was only when she broke off her engagement to actor Max Eric that she realized the full scope of her pansexuality. "Regardless if drama is happening or not, I am too gay to marry a man right now," she said at the time. "I don't know if that will change in 10 years, and I don't know if that'll never change, but I love accepting myself. I've always known I was hella queer, but I have fully embraced it," Lovato concluded.
What a bunch of hogwash. Have you ever heard such googly gosh in your entire life? In that previous slide that I just brought up, just told us we got to let the children tell us who they are. Well, that's who they are. They're so mixed up and confused and screwed up these days that they have no idea who they are, where they're going, and what they're going to do. And we're going to turn this world over to them. Unbelievable, but that's what we're looking at right now. Canadian COVID lockdowns. This is spend a little bit of time in the story here because this is very important, showing you how the world is evolving into having this persecution against the church and how they're using COVID as a way to be able to silence Christians. The authorities physically closed a church over the COVID regulations by erecting a fence around it. So I got the story, and as soon as I finish the story, I want to thank one of our supporters up in Canada, Harold. He sent me a video that I'm going to show you. About a 4-minute video. I cut it down. It was 15 minutes long. So I showed it down to give you an idea of what's going on up there. It says Canadian authorities arrived at Grace Life Church near Edmonton, Alberta on Wednesday. Physically closed. The church had repeatedly violated COVID-19 restrictions. This raid put up fences around the church, said the security putting up the fence in Grace Life says, please pray for wisdom as our elders navigate this development. This is a pretty good sized church. I believe they said it was a Lutheran church that's up there. And I put in all the pictures showing you how they actually surrounding this church. The pastor was actually put in jail for a couple weeks. by breaking the violation. Interesting, though, is that the violation that he broke came with a fine, not with a sentence, although they put him in jail for a couple of weeks for violating the orders. So as they put the fences around it, the church made the first headlines last month as their pastor James Coates was jailed for violating the lockdown orders on March 5th. He was held for 2 weeks before his release, and he still faces an upcoming trial. Got a video, as I just said. It's about 4 minutes long. So here's a person who's actually filming this, and he's actually challenging the police of what's actually going on. Let's play that video.
Okay. This is the scene at Grace Life Church this morning. Here we are at Grace Life Church. RCMP are here, fencing off the church. What are you doing here?
What are we doing now?
Yeah, what are you doing?
We're helping AHS.
You're helping AHS.
Yeah.
Doing their bidding, obviously. Doesn't this make you feel a little sick to your stomach?
I feel fine.
You feel fine shutting down a church? I know you guys are just doing following orders, but this is pretty pathetic, guys. I can't believe you would actually take part in something like this. You realize actions like this are really making people lose faith in organizations like the RCMP. Like, you kind of see where this is pushing. Doesn't that scare you? Doesn't that scare you? Look at this, people. They got the whole church wrapped up in a fence. I don't know if you can see that. They got the whole church building fenced off. They got an 8-foot fence all around that church right now. 8-foot fence. This is your tax dollars being spent here. Guess they think they're saving lives. I don't think this is saving any lives. Look at that. Got all those police vehicles lined up there, all those unmarked. Got Paladin security. They got private security here now. They've actually got 2 lines of fencing. So they've got a fence around the parking lot and a secondary fence around the building. And that inner fence is being covered with fabric so that you can't even see what's going on the other side of that fence. So they're paying private security, 2 rows of fencing. In case you get through the first row, you'll have to battle with the second row. Wow, they really don't want you going to church. They really don't want you going to church. Oh yeah, they got enough fence to go all the way around this place. They got enough fence to go all around this place twice. There's only one place this leads. Civil unrest. And they're not giving people any options. Absolutely pathetic behavior. Oh, AHS told us to do it. AHS told us to close the church, so we're going to close the church because we just do what we're told because we're good officers. I don't know what's coming next. I just can't even believe this is happening. And why do they need privacy fabric? Like, what are they going to be doing in there? Like, is this actually going to be turned into some kind of prison facility? Why do you need the privacy fabric? What, are you going to start, like, ripping people's fingernails off and waterboarding them in there? Like, where does this end? Where does this end? Does this ever end? Oh, they're coming to get me now. I hope you're ashamed of what you're doing. What would your mother think if she found out you were fencing Christian churches for something as simple as holding services? This is something you're comfortable doing? You're okay with this? You're okay with this? Well, I got 2 police officers with me here. They got to defend their fencing. I guess a guy with a camera is pretty scary. Well, this is your new Canada, people. People fought and died for freedom in this country, and you guys just flush it down the toilet. Awesome.
It's amazing. And actually, the video, you can go online and find, is 15 minutes long. I just cut it, as you can see, I was just cutting some of the walking time and some of the dead time that he was doing walking around. But that's pretty serious when you think about it, what's actually going up there, that they spend that kind of time and money to do that. So now, you ought to be glad it can't happen here in America, right? Think again. Here's a bill that's been sitting in in New York City since last year. It's called House Bill A416. It's called the Removal and Detention. The U.S. Senate had just passed the concentration camp bill to forcibly throw people in camps, just like the Nazis did in World War II. That came from News Targetgate. Now, he's pretty much saying exactly the way it really is. Now, a nicer way is if you look at the headline on the right, New York Democratic bill allowing governor to detain individuals dangerous to public health sparks backlash. What do you mean by detaining them? Well, it means putting them in jail, putting them in a camp until they're considered to be safe. New York Democrats bill that would allow the governor or surrogates to detain individuals who pose a threat to public health by a single order in a medical facility or appropriate facility sparked backlash online. That's already passed their Senate. They're just simply waiting for the governor to sign this bill. What does that mean? Just to put it in terms that we can all understand, let's suppose you were in a bar or a restaurant and found that you came down with COVID that night. Well, they'll go back through the trackers, see who was in the bar or the restaurant at that specific time. They will go to your homes and those people that you're in contact with, grab everybody and put you into a camp until you're proven that you're not risky. That's what that means. So does anybody think that that's going to go well or smooth? And they're going to be on time with everything the way government does? That's in America. But now, at the same time, this tweet just came out. It wasn't an accident that our police and our country is inherently international racist, said Dawn Wright, who met with the aggression and violence. She says, I'm done with the government for murder. Here's what she wants to do. This just came out actually this morning following the incident that happened in Michigan again, where the police officer shot another person. And you can see it. I mean, it was horrendous exactly what happened. I mean, that thing's up there is a mess. But anyway, this is where she's taking this now. No more policing, incarceration, and militarization. It can't be reformed. In other words, we can't fix the problem, so let's just do away with it. Try to imagine America with no police. No one protecting the laws, and shutting down all your prisons, turning everybody loose, but at the same time, if you're a threat to public health, we're going to put you in jail. What a contrast. What a contrast. Now, it gets a little more obscure with this. Let's keep that in mind, all right? So that's where we're at. There were two aspects of it. One was the racism that she's saying that has to be stopped, while we just covered a story, remember, praying that God would help her be a racist. See what I mean? What a hypocrisy in our nation. God said it would be sick from its head to its toe. When you put everything on the table, you line it out, and you weigh it against the truth of God, it's absolutely horrendous. Now let's pick up a nugget out of this with that pastor up in Canada, because this is some of the things that he's facing and that we in the United States will be facing in the future. And I don't think it's too far off. Peter and John were put in prison. Remember the story we find in the book of Acts chapter 5. They're put in a prison for preaching Jesus Christ. The angel lets them out. They return to the synagogue and they preach Jesus Christ again. They were then brought to the council where they were beaten. Then they were released again and told not to do it again. Remember, the angel let them out first. They went back and started preaching Jesus Christ again. Kind of similar to that pastor, right? They told him, you can't go in church because it isn't safe to have all those people in there, so quit preaching it. Well, he went back and he preached it anyway. Well, then they came and they fined him, and he went back again. Then they put him in jail. You see the comparisons, what's going on here? So now I'm going to pick up the story in verse 41. So they departed from the presence of the council, and they rejoiced that they were counted worthy to suffer the shame for his name. And daily in the temple and every house they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus Christ. So anyway, those are the things that you and I, God's people and the churches around the country and around the world is going to be. We're going to have to begin to make some of those choices. You can't believe it would happen in America, but it actually is happening right here in America right now. Let's talk about some policy changes of what's going on, how these things do affect us with our lives today. So I'm bringing something in here. This is talking about the global conditions and changing with the policy in the administration right now. These changes extend far beyond Democrat and Republican. When you hear the news, that's all you're hearing anymore. It's Democrat versus Republican. It's just politics that's taking care of everything. But the problem is bigger than this. The current changes are reshaping the landscape of the nations around the globe. So while we're busy focusing on fighting with one another, hurting everyone's feeling, being woke or not woke, being left or being right, being Democrat or being Republican, the fruits of everything that's going on is actually beginning to reshape the entire world. In all these other nations, see how weak and vulnerable we are, and they're jockeying for position right now. Literally, they're changing the Constitution. So to get all these things done, to bring it about, and we warned everybody as early as 2015 in the Constitutional Christian that for these things to take place, they would have to change the Constitution. And we showed you how the Constitution was set in place as a means and a structure to protect God's people, to be able to produce and to report on the preaching of the gospel and the return of Jesus Christ. As soon as this protection is taken away, you will begin to see what's happening in China, where they're literally putting away hundreds of thousands of Christians and even Muslims and just locking them up for preaching Christianity or preaching the Muslim faith. And I'm showing that only because of the government who goes against whatever the people have, and their safety and their protection is being removed. When we take this Constitution away, you will have a government that will begin to move in that direction to be able to force people to do what they want you to do. All right, Biden pulling out 3 defensive missiles. Let me show you now just a few examples today on how these administration changes are actually affecting the world. Biden now just recently pulled out 3 defensive missile batteries from the Middle East. These are stories you're just not hearing. People are not reporting this because there's too many big issues that's going on about people hurting each other's feelings. In his foreign policy speech on February 4th, Joe Biden did announce that the United States would be taking additional steps to correct our foreign policy. See, this is not just Democrat, Republican. He's going to change how we deal with things in our foreign policy, what's going on here. He pledged to end the war in Yemen and to recalibrate the U.S.-Saudi relationships, including the freezing of the sale and the events of weapons of Saudi Arabia that used in a 6-year battle against Yemen. It all sounds pretty good. It says we're going to continue to support and help the Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity and its people. While the language sounds supportive, the actions do not support the rhetoric. This is called speaking out of both sides of your mouth. And that's what's going on right here. So let me show you what he did versus what he said. Kind of like Jesus Christ when he talked to the followers and to his disciples, when he talked to the Pharisees. You know, listen, but don't do. So here's what he's doing now. This is what he's actually doing. During his first week in office, Biden reversed the Donald Trump's designation of the Houthis as a terrorist organization on February 4th. This is the day he said we're going to restructure the Middle East in our policy. Remember, I just read that to you. So what was one of the first things he did? He de-terrorized this organization, who is a terrorist group. He announced his plans to end support for the Saudi-led campaign against the Houthis. Now, didn't he just say he's going to support the Saudis? You see the conflict. This is what he did. This is not guesswork. This is actually what he did. This year alone, new rocket attacks on Saudi Arabia. From who? The Houthis. The United States has sent over a defense mechanism to be able to catch these missiles coming in. What was the first thing he did? He removed 3 of those battalions. So they can't stop the missiles from coming in. See what's going on here? You're not getting this in the news. This is waking up the Middle East. Nations now are aligning with other nations, and many of them are aligning with Israel because they see what's coming between Iran and China and Iran and Russia and some of the other nations around the globe. This is all taking place under our very nose where nobody's talking about it, but it's happening. This is beginning to position what's taking place when we see in the book of Daniel, and I'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. So let's go on. According to Wall Street Journal, the U.S. said that Saudi Arabia is experiencing an unacceptable level of violence from rocket and drone attacks from Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen and the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq. Since January, there have been more than 80 attacks. 80 since January. What is the level of acceptance, by the way? They said an unacceptable level. I mean, it's 20 rocket attacks level. Is that okay? What if it hit your city, your household? What about your family if it hit them? What is acceptable to be able to shoot rockets into another nation that we in the United States say, well, they don't need our help. They're not really terrorists. And then you take away their means of protection. Unbelievable, but this is what's going on right now. Also, during his campaign, Joe Biden spoke of the need to make the Saudi kingdom pay their price. This was a campaign. It's on tape, and you can go back and you can find it. Pay the price for the human rights abuses, and he would make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. That's what he said in his campaign, March 6, 2021. It says, could we be witnessing the foundation of Daniel 11:40? Because Biden now is empowering Iran in anti-Iranian alliances between the Gulf states that were prophesied to form. You see that in Psalm 83. We see all these nations all coming together to go fight against Israel. And the prophecy of Daniel 11, also combined with the prophecy of Psalm 33, shows that the king of the north, or a German-led European army, will join forces with an anti-Iran alliance. Daniel 11:40 says this. At the time of the end, the king of the south will push at him, being the king of the north, shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter the countries, and he shall overflow and pass over. So now we know now when we get to this stage in time in prophecy, we're beginning to bring it down to the very end stages. That wouldn't be very much long before Jesus Christ returns. I believe what we're looking at here is the beginning of the formulation of all these things coming to pass. How long does that take place? Well, we just don't know. But we'll stay on top of this. But we do know from what we're looking at, it is coming. All right, what I'm going back to now is I actually pulled the wrong date into this. This is information Danny had sent me because he does all our tracking for our past shows and he keeps it all documented. It's actually December 4th is what I want to bring up here. When we go looking at it, you can see December 7th up there, Pearl Harbor. So we know the timing it is. But here's what I want to bring out, because we're going back showing you how that we began to put on headlines and began to warn what's coming and how fast things are changing. Altering the Constitution, that's what we're talking about right now. So for all of these things to take place, you have to remove the Constitution. And that's what they're beginning to do right now. And so Biden now is creating the Supreme Court Reform Commission. Have you heard about that? They don't need a commission. This is all a dog and pony show to do what they want to do. They put people together, and they're all Democrats. They're going to say, well, we need to take a look at the Constitution, the Supreme Court, and we want to see if it's still adequate for what we need. Well, you know they're going to come back in what they're going to do. The Biden executive order, Joe Biden signed an executive order, this was last Friday, to create a commission of 36 legal experts to conduct a 180-day study on the Supreme Court reform, including expanding the court's size. So we began talking about this and some of the things that were coming. All right, so we began warning that last year that if the United States, if the Republicans lose Georgia, this is what was going to happen. And we were told it would. Chuck Schumer said this. We take Georgia, then we change the world. Well, that's what they're doing. They took Georgia, and that's a good way of saying it. They took it. They didn't win it. They took it. And now they're changing the world. We showed how all the way back from the time of Ulysses S. Grant in 1868 that Congress has set the number at 9 and has been effective ever since then. It was the last time an attempt was made to change the Supreme Court. It came in 1937, which was, by the way, very similar to where we are at today. it required changing the Constitution. So the way to change the Constitution is you change the Supreme Court and how many people are actually on the Supreme Court. Franklin Roosevelt said it was an effort to get his New Deal approved in the process of altering the Constitution. Now, isn't it amazing now that here we are all these years later, the same thing with a new name. It's now no longer the New Deal, now it's the Green Deal. So we're at that crossroad again. This time it is called the Green New Deal, and they're trying to make the changes. To get this to work, they have to change the Constitution. The way to change the Constitution, if you keep it at 9, that's not going to happen. So we're going to what they call pack the court. So if they pack the court and they bring in 13 or 15, who do you think they're going to bring in? Then they can begin to change the Constitution. Roosevelt did this, but he was elected in 3 terms. He actually changed by each time a Supreme Court justice was changed, he brought in a left-wing supportive of his administration. And over the course of 12 years, they altered the Constitution enough to begin to do and create the problem we are in today. What is that problem? It has been able to take from one person and give to another. It began to alter how we do things because you see, it was legal and it was very illegal to take money from you to give to somebody else. But to get the economy going, he said, well, we have to take it from those who have money and give it to those who don't. That's what we're doing today. The new tax law. See this new tax law, what is it doing today? The new tax law is, well, you got the very wealthy and you got the people who need it. So we're going to take it from them and give to them. As much as that might sound nice to many people, especially if you're in an area that you would like to have more funds, it isn't biblical. Anytime you try to create something to make work what the Bible says you don't do, you're heading into danger. And that's where the United States is today, is at the crossroad of danger. It says to accomplish the implementation of the Green New Deal, it requires changing the Constitution of the United States. Now, let me show you this. I'm talking about all these different changes, and I need to move on. The time's going to run out on me. Biden's tax hikes would cost a million jobs in just 2 years, the study says. According to a new study from the National Association of Manufacturers, Joe Biden's plan will significantly increase taxes to pay for his $2.25 trillion infrastructure. By the way, infrastructure, they're changing what that means. It's no longer just infrastructure, it's a lot of things now. So to get accomplished what you need to accomplish, he has to change the definition of what things are. So now they're rewriting definitions to be able to accomplish what they want to do. Unbelievable what they're doing here. Now, New York proposes stimulus for the illegals. Now, with the last bill that they just proposed, how the money keeps going and say it's okay, well, it's only fair that the poor get it. Well, let me show you how far they take this. The money in the last bill that came out, the 1.9 COVID stimulus bill, offered many states, including New York, hundreds of billions of dollars to get them out of the problem for being shut down. Mismanagement of government that's been building for years is what they're doing. Let me show you what New York is doing right now. They're offering a one-time payment of $15,600 planned for undocumented immigrants. Illegals want to give each one of them $15,000. So the 2 House Republicans are asking the White House for details of a plan that would hand out about $2 billion in just New York alone, $2 billion to illegal immigrants. I'm not making that up. They want to know what this $2 billion is going for. So it now appears that New York is using its state budget, recently bolstered by the billions of federal dollars, to funnel money to illegal immigrants, they wrote. They said to qualify, people must prove, and this is all they have to do now, they must prove they're a New York resident who were eligible for unemployment, who are ineligible for unemployment benefits and stimulus checks due to their immigration status. Well, why do you think that they were not allowed to have that? Well, they're not legal citizens. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio defended the program. So then I had to ask myself, how do you prove that you're a resident? You think maybe they need an ID? You see where I was going with that? The whole thing is just nonsense. But they knew this was the intention from day one. Can you imagine that you're struggling along and you got a house of 6 or 7 different individual refugees living there and each one of them get $15,000? How would that make you feel? They ride around in a brand new car, plenty food, don't have to work, get their insurance paid for. Deuteronomy says, the fruit of your land and your labor shall a nation which you do not know shall eat it up, and you shall be oppressed and crushed always, so that you shall be made mad at the sight of your eyes when you see it. Now, when you saw that, did it just kind of make you mad? We're living in Bible days. These are the end times where God says when it's going to come back, and you're in the middle of it. All right, now, I got another little segment that we're going to begin talking about. So I'm just going to bring in just a couple of stories here because there's no way to cover everything here, but I need to begin to introduce what's going on here. China's developing world dominance, Russia expanding its military, and Iran beginning to negotiate for the nuke. All right, so there's no way to cover all of these things, but these are things that you need to put on your drawing board right now to watch. So we're going to cover China challenging America's powers on all fronts. By the way, did you hear this morning, approximately 20 or 25 Chinese fighters have flew into Taiwan's territory. Well, that means that Taiwan can't defend itself, and that's part of the structure that the United States is supposed to help them and defend them. So China now is pushing the envelope to show that the United States isn't going to do anything. They're going to continue to do and expand to wherever they need, and they're going to get these warnings and the slaps by America saying, don't do that again. But that's what's going on. So now, what else did they do? A $400 billion deal with Iran. That's right, with Iran. There's Smiley. I hadn't seen him in a few years. Remember, I used to call this guy Smiley. No matter when you've seen him, no matter what it was, he'd be talking about hating Israel. He'd be hating and killing Israel and wiping them off the face of the earth. He's smiling. He does it with a smile. China is sensing America's internal political difficulties amid the social justice protests. In response to taking off the gloves, Beijing is said to be in the final stages of approving a $400 billion economic and security deal with Tehran. So while the United States still has them in somewhat of a lockdown as far as support, China is just stepping right in and saying, we're going to make sure that they're okay. Now, both countries see the deal as a mutually beneficial, but as the potential mechanism for confronting the U.S. dominance in the Middle East, and that's what's going on. They're going to give them what they need. They're going to give them the funds. They're also going to give them the military weapons. And if they don't get it from China, then they'll have the money to buy from Russia. China's strategic investment together with the military cooperation would boost one of the most anti-American powers to threaten American allies in the Middle East from Riyadh to Jerusalem to provide Chinese companies preferred access to trillions of dollars of untapped hydrocarbons on the market. In other words, that's the oil. The oil that they're not selling anywhere else. China said, take it. We'll take it. We'll buy from you. So get them back to where they were. Give them the power they need to continue to restructure to fight America. In the meantime, Israel has says that they're going to prevent a nuclear Iran, whether or not a deal is in place or not. So while they were negotiating to go back into the deal that was stopped by the last administration, by the way, Iran is saying, look, we're not negotiating anything. This is the way it's going to be. Unless you do this for us, we're not negotiating any deal, they said. They're just throwing their weight around. This comes from the times of Israel. Said on the eve of Purim, I would say those who seek to harm us. This has come from Benjamin Netanyahu. Iran and its proxies in the Middle East. From 2,500 years ago, another Persian tyrant tried to destroy the Jewish people, and just as he failed, you too will fail, giving the message to Iran. This was spoken at the day of the Feast of Purim. Netanyahu said at the memorial ceremony in the northern town of Tel Hai, referencing the Purim story. So he's telling Iran, you can do whatever you want to do, and it's not going to succeed. He went on to say, we did not make the generations-long journey for thousands of years to back the land of Israel, to allow a delusional regime of the Ayatollahs to end the story of the resurrection of the Jewish people, he said. He said, it's just not going to happen. While at the meantime, I don't know if you saw this, a blackout struck the Natanz nuclear facility in Iran, and Iran says it's sabotage. The nuclear facility in Iran mysteriously lost power on Sunday in what Iranian officials called an act of sabotage, a development that comes amid new negotiation forces salvaging the nuclear deal repudiated by the Trump administration 3 years ago. So say we're going to get a nuke deal or not, doesn't matter. We're pushing for a nuclear nation. And Israel saying you're not going to get a nuclear nation as long as we're here. So, I mean, that's what's going on. So you can see, again, as we said a little while ago, the king of the north and the king of the south, you also here is you see another piece of the puzzle where you'll see the potential for armies surrounding Jerusalem. See, this is all coming. All this is taking place while we're sitting over here worrying about being woke. Unbelievable what's going on here. The most powerful nation on earth is now becoming a second class to China, to Russia, and to the Middle East. All right, let's take a break. So when we come back, I'm going to begin explaining the Feast of Weeks from the same chart you used to explain the time of the week in the middle of the crossing. Let's take a look at this little short video here. It's only about a minute long. The Exodus and leaving Egypt, and I'll be right back. Isn't it just absolutely amazing how much they can pack into a 1 minute or a minute and 10-second little video? Absolutely wonderful little story. All right, let's go on. Welcome back to the program here. All right, let's talk about now examining the Feast of Weeks, since we're actually into the Feast of Weeks. And we left you with a question last week, and we've been using this chart. In everything we do, I don't change the chart. Only the object of what we're talking about within the chart. It's basically on time, the timeline. The beginning here began with the crucifixion week. Remember where Christ was crucified on a Wednesday? And we went all the way through. So talking about he was crucified on the 14th day of the first month. So we went on through and we laid it out as we see here. The 15th began the days of unleavened bread. So now we have the 7 days of unleavened bread we brought out. So we talked about the beginning of the chart, talking about the crucifixion being on a Wednesday. 3 days, 3 nights later, he was resurrected Saturday evening, just before sunset, like he was put into the tomb just before sunset. And then, of course, you have Sunday morning just before sunrise, where he ascends to the Father to sit on the right hand of God the Father. So we have all of that laid out very, very carefully. Then we showed you how the creation was for mankind tied into the 7 days or the 7,000-year plan of God. The 4,000 years being the coming, Jesus Christ coming the first time in the midst of the week or the end of the 4th day, before the 5th day, just before sunset. And then we had 3 more days all the way till the end of the millennium. You have 2 days, and then on the 7th day begins a millennial reign of the 1,000 years. So that's what we were looking at in our plan. The millennium begins the 7,000 years. And by the way, if you're new to it, you want to read and understand that when we rule and reign with Christ, it says in Revelation, we are here on this earth, not in heaven, which is a very important point which people in this world do not understand. We asked the question back then about Christ being on the crucifixion actually outside the 7,000-year plan, so we left you with one of those questions of how that would actually take place. And then we went back and answered and showed you how it actually took place, because he says he was crucified before the world began. In other words, so he knew that this was going to be done at the very beginning. So now what I have here, I put up here, this is the actual days of the journey of the children of Israel which documents, by the way, the crossing of the sea in the middle of the week. See, that's, a lot of people don't understand that, and that's the story. You want to go back if you don't understand that yet, and you're still following the way the worldwide taught it many years ago. You need to go back and take a look at this because you missed the typology of the duality of the events that's actually taken place. So anyway, we went through that pretty thoroughly in the previous programs also. So then now we come to, we're erasing pretty much everything here to give us a clean slate, leaving the same chart. See, the time frame never changes, only the explanation of what we're talking about. We left you with the question last week. So while we understand the man's journey of 7,000 years is correct, talking about leaving Egypt, how long does it take to get out of Egypt, like the children of Israel? Can you use the exact same chart to fill it in to explain the Feast of Weeks? That's where we left you last week, and that's where we're going to pick up today. How well did you do? Were you able to use that exact same chart to explain the Feast of Weeks? All right, let's talk about that today now. All right, so I want to begin with giving you a couple keys. To understand the Feast of Weeks, you have to take in a considerable amount of information. First, God's plan of salvation for mankind is built upon the sevens. All right, so the sevens. Well, I'll show you that in just a second. Also, the second point, there is an existence beyond the sevens. So you and I were built, we were created, and we live within the sevens. We live from the time of Genesis when God formed man, breathed life into him, until the end of the 7,000-year plan when you see the new heaven and the new earth comes. Within those sevens, you and I exist. We're given a brief period of time, and we use it. If we do well, then God says he will have eternity. If Jesus Christ, we accept him as our personal Lord and Savior. If not, well, then you never get to go to the eights. Your time is over. So now, what are the sevens? Let's begin with the sevens. What are the sevens? First of all, there's 7 days. There's 7 weeks. And there's 7 periods of 1,000 years. All right, that's what we're looking at here. There's also, by the way, 7 times punishment. Well, thankfully, we're not going to go into the punishment, but I wanted to bring that out because there's something you want to consider. If you decide not to repent and do what God says he could bring your punishment on you 7 times greater each time you don't. All right, so now let's begin to talk about Pentecost. Now, people in the world today, and actually some people and even in the church have not had the full explanation of what's going on here. They think Pentecost is a one-day event. It's the birth of the New Testament church is what they think. And it is, but only in part. If you don't put the whole package together, you miss the entire meaning of what Pentecost is. Because, see, Pentecost is not a one-day event. It's actually what God calls the Feast of Weeks that encompasses 7 sevens. All right, so now, Pentecost actually takes in all 3 of the sevens. So when you try to explain Pentecost, you have to take in the days, the weeks, and the thousands of years. They all have to come into play to explain Pentecost, using the same chart. I'm going to put that chart back up in just a minute. But more importantly, it includes the time that extends beyond the 7. All right, you ready? Let's begin to explain what we're talking about here. All right, here's Pentecost. So now you have Leviticus 23:10, God begins to explain Pentecost. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them that when you come to the land that I shall give you, you shall reap the harvest thereof. Then you shall bring a sheaf of firstfruits of the harvest unto the priest. So God's saying, now remember, this sacrifice was taking place before Genesis. That he was crucified. In other words, he put his life on the line before the world was ever recreated. And by the way, it was recreated because you can see in Genesis the way it's written, it says it became void. So from that time on, God went back, put it all back together the way it was. So from that time, that when you come into the land, talking about mankind coming into the land that God gave it. What is it? This earth. It's 7,000 years. So when you come, you're going to wave the sheaf. What do we have here? Christ, who was chose beforehand. Sin took place on the very first day, right? By rights, the wages of sin is death. That when the man sinned, he would have died. But he didn't. God waived that, and I'm going to show you that for the next verses. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. He shall wave it. Now, this is very important because when people talk about Sivan 6, they count it any other time they want to count it, but it cannot be counted that way. It always has to be counted from the morrow after the Sabbath. What is the first day of the week? It's always been a Sunday. By the way, they've never lost track of days. You can say they lost track of months and they lost track of time, but they have never lost track of the days of the week. Satan's made sure of that because he didn't want you to even keep the Sabbath by accident. So he's made sure you know when Sunday is so that you can worship him on Sunday. It's just a little side story. All right, so the first day, which is the morrow after the Sabbath, it begins. All right, that's when the first wave sheath took place, when Jesus Christ killed the animals and clothed Adam and Eve with the skins. You shall count from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaves. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even to the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days. So what you're looking at, see the counting. The 7 days or the 7 weeks or the 7,000 years are the object of what Pentecost before and the morrow after the Sabbath takes place. See, mankind isn't about you. We're the object of what God's accomplishing in this harvest for what's going on outside the sevens. So you have your days of your weeks, all right, Monday through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and there's our 7 days. You also have 7 weeks. God says 7 sevens. You also have the 7,000-year plan of God. So all of these all tie into the exact same plan, and it depending how they're talking about, as Peter mentions, a day is 1,000 years. God calls this the Feast of Weeks in the Old Testament. Simply, the New Testament uses Pentecost because it's a Greek word, means 50. That's all it means is 50. Exodus 34 says, and you shall observe the Feast of Weeks of the first fruit of the wheat harvest. It says, you shall keep the Feast of Weeks unto the Lord. That's in Deuteronomy. Look at 2 Peter 3. Beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing. The day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. Genesis 2:17. Remember, God says, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die. So that shows us what Peter was saying, a day is 1,000 years. So when this took place, according to the literal, if you took a day as a day instead of 1,000 years, on that very day that Adam ate, he would die. But he didn't. He lived to be a ripe old age. In fact, Methuselah was almost 1,000, but no one has ever lived 1,000 years. So no one has ever lived beyond that day being 1,000 years. So what God said is absolutely true. So he took the interchanging of the day as 1,000 years. So it's also the first week. That's where you have the 7 sevens, and you have each week over 1,000 years. So now the counting of the Feast of Weeks. Now remember now, this is important. You see that little arrow there? I got that circle around explaining the Christ being crucified outside the sevens. That was the time he defined that he would divest himself of his eternity, of his power, of his grace, the might, and the glory he had to come down as a mortal man for you and I. He decided that before he created the earth. It says, and you shall count from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the wave sheath, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Right? But remember, we just read here with Peter. Remember, this is what we talked about before, that Jesus Christ was crucified before the foundation of the earth. So when we begin counting, and you're looking at the plan of 7,000 years, it's always the morrow after the Sabbath. There's the first day, always beginning, it was a Sunday, a day of the week. Christ is on the outside. And so when you and I begin our count, it is not counted in the middle of a week. It can't work that way. It never works that way. And you see the plan of God, when you lay it all out, it's impossible to work that way. It always has to be on the morrow after the Sabbath is when you begin your count. People who pick the wrong Sabbath on which to begin to count to come to a Sivan 6, you're wrong. Once in a while you might hit it right, but usually you're wrong in the way it's done, because you go 7 weeks complete to the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. So you always have to finish on the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. 7,000 years is complete. So now, even unto The morrow after the seventh Sabbath, you shall number 50 days. You shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. So when is that? Right here. That's the 8th day. So when you count the Feast of Weeks, you have to count when you try to impose or superimpose a timeline on the real creation of time. You have to take it from the time when Jesus Christ first said, I will go to earth and I will lay down my life to remove sin. Because remember, Satan had already sinned. The earth had become polluted, completely polluted. And so when man was created, he was deceived, he sinned, and actually Jesus Christ came down. When is it complete? Right here at the end of the 7,000 years, where Jesus Christ restores all things unto the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, you see the new heaven and the new earth, and everything's returned back to the Heavenly Father. So there you have the plan of God all laid out. Same plan over the 7 days, and everything we have talked about, the week, the Feast of Weeks, the crucifixion, the crossing, the time in Egypt, everything all lays out, and you know it never changes. The plan of God. It all fits perfectly. All right, let's move on now. April 16th from the home office. All right, last week the sermons went out, Heart to Heart by Josh Hunt, and the News Nuggets and Insights on April 2nd, Our Changing Planet, the Pope in the Midst of the Week. All right, this is hopefully this is really important. We're going to try to see if we can finally break out and start getting out and visiting everyone again and trying to bring in possible new fruit into the church. Pentecost weekend, I'll be in Syracuse. Actually, I'll be speaking on both days up there. On Saturday, we plan on doing a public campaign, and we're hoping to be able to bring people out through outreach in that particular area. And then Sunday, I'll be delivering a Pentecost service. So if you're interested and you're in the area, they're making lots of arrangements. They have lots of activity and food and fellowship. Get in touch with Steve Council. You get all the information right here on your screen. Just pause it, write it down, and either send him an email or give him a call. They've also made arrangements at the Quality Inn and Suites in Goshen. Kind of poetic here. When I went up there to keep Passover with him a few years ago, we actually went to Goshen. So, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, how many places can you go to Goshen and take the Passover? So anyway, it's at the Quality Inn and Suites in Goshen, Indiana. They got a rate of $95 per night. Boy, these hotels, I mean, they give you a break these days. Even the break seems like it's going to break you. But anyway, that's a good price compared to what they're charging, $95 a night. So they're going to be beginning with a dinner. They're going out for a dinner at a very special place on Friday evening for the whole group to come together. And then they'll have services and fellowship and food right there at the church for the rest of the weekend. So if you can come anywhere near that, please, please, please come on out. And I'd like to meet you if I've never met you before, and let's get out and do some fellowship. Tomorrow, this Sabbath, I'm going to be doing a sermon called The Prophets. So I got an interesting little take on how I want to talk about that tomorrow. So if you don't have anywhere to go and you're stuck at home, you have nobody to meet with, just flip on the screen and take a look and tune in with us. And we've been fortunate, been streaming again. Cox Cable has got us working. We got some storms coming through the next couple of days, but probably that'll mess everything up. So when you tune in Saturday, it won't be there. Well, anyway, let's hope it will be. The Prophets, tune in, live stream this week with us on the church website. All righty, that's it. Let's get into our final portion of our program. Here we go. I kind of jumped my little clicker. This little video is a short little video. It's Psalm 1, verse 3. Take a look. I'll be right back to close our program.
Blessed is the man who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. But the man who delights in the law of the Lord and meditates on his law day and night, he is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers.
Well, that's it for the program. Isn't it amazing how much information you put into one little video? It's amazing when you see God's Word come to life right in front of your very eyes. Well, that's it. That's our program for today. We want to thank you again for tuning in, being a part of God's Unchanging Word, our news nuggets and insights. And as we tell you each and every week, make sure you share this with everyone you know. They're going to love you for it. Or not. Till next week, God be with you.